now, like, we're here. So, I mean, yeah, we have a lot of services, but I mean, most of the stuff that, you know,
if we're just now
busyness.
getting to the planning,
Yeah, I mean,
we've
this week,
screwed
I don't know,
ourselves.
is really all that much more. If you take away like the actual like setting up for the services and doing the services, I don't know if this week is necessarily any more than any other, just because hopefully, like you said, we've already done all the planning. But either way, here we are.
Have you ever had like an Easter where there was just like everything fell apart or something major happened that was like, oh my gosh?
I mean, we have had sunrise services where it rained and we had to come inside and adjust for that.
Like
And
mid-service?
no, not like mid-service, but I do remember one of the first ones I was like in my first appointment, we were supposed to have a service outside and it was not supposed to rain and we didn't even think about it. It was just one of those things that slipped our mind. And so then we got there and it was dark, so you couldn't really see. And then like we were setting up chairs and then we heard a thunderclap. We were like, oh no. Because we realized collectively we had no backup plan for it. And so we looked at the forecast and it was like, oh yeah, we're about to get like a storm. It's about to be bad. And so we had to go inside and we made it work. But it was one of those things where it's, you know, the first thing you think of when you have an outdoor services or any kind of outdoor event is what are you going to do if it rains?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, it just never crossed our mind to have a backup plan. So we definitely did next year. And of course it did rain again for the next
it rained,
3 years.
It rained last year. So it was never like a downpour, but it was enough rain that we definitely couldn't do it outside. And we had a backup plan, but there were a lot of like things about the backup plan that we hadn't taken into account. And so we're like, oh gosh, this is going to take way longer to set up than we thought. And
Well, it's dicey because it's usually in April and, you know, April showers. I mean, there's a reason why that's a phrase. And so, yeah, I think that's always a reality.
back when I was at First Methodist Plano, we used to do a sunrise service. So the sunrise was the only service that was contemporary at Plano, at least back when I was there. And so there's a park right across the street.
Yeah.
And then if you go into that park, there's a really big amphitheater. And that's where we did it. And because we were the neighbors of that park and they never used it for anything on Easter, at least early in the morning, they gave us like this just banging discount to rent it out. And so we did worship every year, super early. So I remember getting there at like 4 every year. And there was one year when I say like 20 minutes after we wrapped worship, it was like the heavens opened up.
Ugh.
I mean, just like I was literally going back up to go run media. And as I pulled up, at that point, all I had to do was pack up my acoustic guitar and my mic stand. And that's it. And then so I'm headed back up to the church. And as I'm pulling into the parking lot, just I'm like, really?
Gross.
Oh, I hope they got everything. Luckily, the amphitheater stage was covered. And so they just like rushed everything to the center of the stage, apparently. And they just were like, wait till it stops.
Wait it out. Yeah, outdoor events are not my favorite because it's going to rain or it's going to be hot or, I mean, it's a lot. And sometimes they can be cool, but going to them is one thing. But like planning one and putting one on I just feel like the anxiety makes it hard for the event to be worth it because you're just so stressed out that the weather's going to be horrible or there's going to be like crazy mosquitoes or wasps or ants or all the things we've had to deal with. So,
Did you hear about last year what happened on Easter?
The power went out, right?
We don't actually know to this day. I just remember coming in and it was the Waldrops and Kevin and I were the first ones here. And then Kevin and I we came in at the same time and we walked in and the Waldrops were just kind of staring at us laughing. We're like, what's going on? What's that smell? And something happened, and the entire worship center was it looked like somebody ran a haze machine. Not a fog machine, but a haze machine. So there was something in the air that made it kind of viscous, like you could see it. And it smelled like a big electrical circuit popped or failed. And we were like, what is this?
Yeah. Did you find it?
No.
Oh.
So it was Kelly who basically said, we need to get a fire department here and make sure that this isn't like a real problem. And so they went all over this building trying to figure out where it could have come from. And when they walked in, they were like, yeah, we smell it. Like there's something down here, and it's electrical based. And so they went around with meters and all kinds of stuff. They didn't find any carbon monoxide or anything, but they went around. They're like, a building this size, it could have been
what in the world?
Literally hundreds of things.
What in the world? Happy Easter.
Yeah, and so we just basically opened up all the doors in the worship center, got any fans that we had, ran them during the sunrise, which was happening in 110 because there was rain. And we were just like, okay, this morning is a lot, but we made it through.
I'm hoping that this year, it looks like it's probably going to rain. I'm hoping that it holds off enough that we can do sunrise outside. But if a little bit of rain is the worst that happens, we'll be all right. Yeah. I'm hoping for.
I'm feeling good about it. Do you? So like for Easter, because you're going to have even if you did no marketing, no anything, you're going to have
it's the biggest day of the year.
Double the amount of people minimum. And so like, what does that do for you? Like when you're crafting, you're writing your sermon.
This is a great question. So my first appointment, the senior pastor there loved these days, but he wanted to decenter the message. He was like, people aren't here for the sermon. They're here because they want to sing Silent Night on Christmas Eve. They're here because they want to, see all the music and the flowers and, all of that on Easter. They're not really listening to you. And so and there's some truth to that. So his sermons were always like 10 minutes, super short. He's like, I want to make a lot of space for music and everything else. And so that was never the focus of the service. And he was pretty, just convinced that there were other things to prioritize that day. So I didn't necessarily agree with that. I could understand where he was coming from and how, like, especially on Christmas Eve, you have a lot of music and the Advent wreath and the candles, and like there's a lot of other elements that go in the service. So I could see that, but I didn't really agree with this concept that, people aren't really listening anyway. That's not why they're there. And I was like, I don't know. I just feel like I have a different take on it. So then for a few years, I hated the High Holy Days because when you've been in an appointment for a few years, it's like, what else are you going to say? Like, you've told the Easter story. You've told all your stories that have to do with Easter. Like, because when you're preaching, you're doing different topics, you're doing different series. You can mix it up. You can talk about different things. But on these days, like on Palm Sunday, you're going to talk about Palm Sunday. You're going to talk about the triumphal entry. There's only so much you can say before you have to kind of either repeat a message or, an approach to it or whatever. And Christmas is the same way. Like there's just only so many different ways to talk about the birth of Christ and what that means.
I mean, you can get gimmicky with it, I guess.
You can, but like at some point,
that gets old
just
too.
For me, as I'm writing it, I'm like, I've already said all this. I just don't know that I've got a new approach to it. So what helped me a little bit in that is one, somebody said, no offense, but people don't really remember like your sermons from years ago. So it's okay. And two, I wouldn't like retell the same like personal story because they might remember that. They're like, oh yeah, you talked about the scroll. Because I did work with somebody once that told the same story on Ash Wednesday. It was literally the same story every single year, and everyone was like, oh, God, because they could almost give the sermon every year at that point. But they also talked about how repetition is good and like we forget things and it's good to be reminded. Like every Christmas, it's good to be reminded to be joyful. It's good to be reminded to be generous and get presents for other people and celebrate the season and all those things. So that was part of it. But the thing that really changed for me is when I worked at the church plant. And everything we were doing was evangelism. Everything was about growing the church because we would die if we didn't. And we realized that the hardest part was getting people there for the first time. Once they're there, you have some agency.
You have infinite opportunity to get them to want to come back.
Yes.
But you can't do anything until you get them there.
Exactly. Because you can follow up with them. You control the service and their experience.
And this was all before COVID, when we were thinking there was the third opportunity of worship, meaning online.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't really something we were doing in most of the churches I was a part of. And so
now you can't
now
escape
everyone's doing it. So at least now we have a much better way to kind of put ourselves out there to people with all the live stream capabilities. So anyway, it was pretty clear that getting them in the room for the first time was the hardest part of growing a church. And then I began to think like, well, on these big days, people come to us. Like you just said, like even if you don't market for it, a ton of people are going to come on Easter.
Yep.
So you have the biggest attendance day with the highest percentage of unchurched or nominally religious people who are there for one reason or another. They came with a family member. They just wanted to go to church because it's Easter, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
They're new to the area. They're trying to check stuff out. For one reason or another, they're there. Don't squander the opportunity. And so I took a pivot in that season where I started trying to give, I worked really hard on those sermons and I tried to give the best sermons I possibly could because I said, this is the opportunity. I'm in front of more people. I wanted the music to be the best it could be. I wanted our hospitality to be the best it could be. I wanted everything because that day, and it's not because that day has to be perfect so much because I feel like we get lost in that. We're like, we got to clean the campus and prepare everything because this day has to be perfect. But we've talked about this before, that day in and of itself can't be the goal because if nobody comes back the next week, well, who cares if you had 1,000 people on Easter? It didn't change your overall ministry. And so not that day has to be necessarily big, but it's going to be, and you have an opportunity more than any other day in the year to try to pitch why people should invest in their spirituality, why they should connect with the spiritual home, and this might be it. And so you should try to do the best that you can on these days, not only for the sake of the day, but because it's your best opportunity to try to reach people who otherwise would never come through your door.
Now, the inverse side of that is because you're absolutely right. This is, in many cases, the only opportunity in the year that you get to try and say, it is worth it for you to come back. But how do you do that without making the people who are here every week go, well,
I'm already going to come back? That's a good question. I don't, because I guess my answer is
you don't want to insult them,
No,
but you
no,
also
no.
don't want to just placate to, if you suck because you only come here once a year and you should definitely be here more often or whatever. You don't want to guilt them. That's not the right approach either. But there's this weird balance that it's almost like a tightrope walk. You can't go too far one side or the other because just preaching to the people who are already going to be here, preaching to the choir, so to speak, that's not going to get you very far in the sense of trying to convict somebody that there is a reason to come back, but you can't only focus on if you never come, you should definitely come back. Because then people who are already here all the time, going, wait a second, did I need to not come today? What's the deal?
Which is the majority of your crowd. So, I mean, I think that's the other element of this. So I've come at it in two different ways. Sometimes I don't really directly address it. I just try to let the experience speak for itself. So I want to do church the best that we can. So if somebody is here for the first time, they get to experience the best that we have to offer in the hopes that they might come back. Sometimes, though, I do try to name it. I have definitely seen preachers who stand up and they're like, well, thank you for those of you who were here on Christmas Eve. It's great to see you again. They kind of guilt people into feeling bad for only coming to church once or twice a year. I don't think that's helpful. I think, you're not shaming somebody into church is not the way that I want to approach religion. But I think that I've done this a few different ways in different sermons for different reasons. So sometimes if I'm giving a sermon that's really challenging or convicting, or I really want people to take a deeper step in their discipleship or service, or you don't do this all the time, but sometimes you really want to challenge people. There are going to be people who are there who can't do that. They're brand new, so they don't even know if they believe in this Jesus guy, much less are they willing to do anything for him. They might have just gone through a loss or a tragedy in that space, and they don't have the capacity to think about that right now. They're literally just trying to survive. Maybe they just lost their job, they lost a loved one. Like they came to church because they needed hope to try to get them through the day, because they hardly can keep their head. I mean, the water is right at their head. So in those instances, I try to remember and remind myself that when I'm going to give that sermon, I try to get to the point, because every sermon I give, I want there to be good news, some kind of hope. Get to the hope and say, look, if you're new, you're still trying to figure this out, or if you're just underwater and trying to survive, this is what I want you to know. But essentially, the sermon's over for you. Like, I just want you to know this hope, and I want you to be encouraged, and I want you to be all right in that. But if you're just doing okay, and this is just kind of another day for you, and you've got some capacity to lean in this season, there's a little bit more. I'll follow me into kind of a deeper challenge for you. And again, if you're just not in a season where you can handle that, just know God loves you. You're enough, whatever the good news of the day was. So I try to give people permission to self-select out if they're just not in a space where they can hear that right now. Most people aren't. Most people, maybe life's a little stressful. Maybe they've got some projects going on, or everyone's got busyness, but many of your people are not going to be in crisis in that moment.
Sure.
But guaranteed some are. So sometimes I try to leave space for that. Similarly in this, sometimes I have done Easter sermons, which now you've made me think, what am I going to do this Sunday? Because I've already kind of written the sermon, but I haven't really I've outlined it and I kind of know what I want to say, but I haven't really finalized it.
Do you practice your sermons verbally?
Yeah.
Do you do it while you're driving? Do you like it? What's your?
No, I do it like the day. Well, depending on how much I feel. Let me circle back around to that. Okay. So,
I'm always curious about everybody's methodology. I like it.
So for Easter, sometimes, or Christmas Eve or a big day like that, sometimes I will name it and I will say, look, I know many of you are here for the first time in a long time. And I just want you to know, man, I'm so glad you're here. And a lot of times people make you feel guilty. So I'll try to give them some comfort and say, I'm thankful you're here. Maybe you came with your grandma because you're in town. I'm glad you're here. I hope you find some hope. And I hope that you know that she's happy you're here. And just something to kind of speak directly to that, because obviously we have doubled the attendance today. Obviously, a lot of people are here for the first time, and there's different reasons why they might be. And so sometimes I have named that and I have said, look, I know that there might be several people in here who are here for one reason or another, but you don't have a regular church home, or you don't have a regular kind of connection to a faith community. And I just want, and give some kind of a word of hope or an invitation just to say, look, here's what we're about here. And if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, well, we'd love to connect further with you. We hope you'll come back next week. We're doing a series, and that's why we really try to put emphasis on what is our series immediately after Easter that seems like it might be thought-provoking or interesting to somebody who's kind of engaging with church for the first time or the first time in a long time. So I think we have a good one for this year. So all to say, sometimes I'll just try to say, my approach is let's just do church the best we can and let that speak for itself. Sometimes I try to actually name it in the room and say, hey, I know you're here and you're not usually here, and I'm so glad you're here. And depending on where you are in these different, possibilities of that, here's my word for you or whatever. So I don't know what I'm going to do this Sunday, but I'm glad that you brought it up because I do want to think about it. For my sermons, it really varies. And I won't get into this because I could talk about it for 6 hours. But I have long debated how I can make the most space for the Holy Spirit to show up in my preaching. Because if you script out the entire thing, you're sort of assuming the Spirit is showing up in the writing process.
Yes.
If you only have a few bullet points and you kind of walk up there with the details of exactly what you're going to say not spelled out, you're hoping the Spirit shows up in the moment. Both can happen. sometimes neither happens. And that's where I've struggled, because also for the timing of it. Like this last Sunday, man, I just went way off the rail. My sermon was so much longer than I wanted it to be because I chased a lot of rabbits in the middle of the sermon. I had way fewer notes that day. I knew what I wanted to say. And it turns out I had a lot of things to say that were, loosely related to the topic. And so to me, like, that's an example of this Sunday, I probably should have scripted it out more, because I just had so many different ideas. I didn't narrow it down to really what I wanted to say. I was happy with everything I said. It was just too much in one day. So I've gone back and forth. So when I practice, that's one of the biggest pieces that's helpful for me, because if I have a lot scripted out, am I just going to read it? Because that's going to be boring. And
we've all been there in a church where it was either an associate pastor who almost never preaches, or somebody who is guest preaching that never isn't a preacher, like a youth or something, and they are reading a manuscript like as if they're giving a presentation in school, and you're like, oh, this is brutal.
And you can be a manuscript preacher and be engaging, but you got to know the manuscript, and you got to be intentional about that. Because I've also known people who preach with notes or no notes, and they're also really hard to follow. They're either boring or they tangent into things that you're like, what is all of this about? This just feels like a stream of consciousness for 20 minutes. So all to say, yes, practicing out loud really is helpful for me, because when you have an idea in your mind, but you're not really sure how to put it into words? Well, that's bad in a sermon, and there have been moments like that where I'm like, I know what I want to say, but I don't, and so I struggle to get it out. So that's helpful when I practice it. If I can go, okay, I kind of meandered my way through that. I need to write it out more so I can kind of keep myself clear on how am I communicating something that maybe is a little more abstract or kind of hard to put into words in that space. And then sometimes I'll say it out loud to see how long is it going to be. How many times did I feel tempted to chase a tangent that was not on the page? Did this joke seem funny when I said it? Which that's the hardest thing. And there's a difference. And I try to have a sense of humor and not write jokes, because usually when you try to write jokes, they don't land. But basically, without fail, most of the things that I think are going to be funny in a sermon, no one laughs at. And something I'll say offhand that I didn't even plan, people will think is really funny. And I'm like, but wait, why? Why did you laugh at that? And so weaving humor into your sermon is really, really hard in that space, just because you never know what's going to. Timing is really important, and it's just how you deliver it. It might be funny, but if you don't say it right, it's not going to work.
Stand-up comedians, you and I have talked about this number of times on this podcast, that what they do is nothing short of brilliant, because it's so much harder than you think. Yep. If you've ever been at a live comedy room and somebody who was new to stand-up was bombing, it's the most uncomfortable.
It's horrible.
It's the most uncomfortable thing in the world. I had a buddy of mine who, he had started talking about this. I think I'm going to do stand-up comedy, and he was like way off into the Christian world, and he was like, okay, I think I'm going to blend the two. I think there's a need for that, and we're like, yeah, you should definitely do it, man. And so he was talking about this for months and months, and then he actually got a spot at a coffee shop, 15-minute slot to do it. And he said, I'm going to go Facebook Live with it. So if you can't because it was out in Garland or something like that. And so to support him, I'm like, I'll hop on. I couldn't make it.
It's
4 minutes. And I was just like, I am so uncomfortable, because he is just bombing. He was waiting for responses and laughter, and it never came. I'm like, oh no, this is... I'm sitting in my bedroom, and I'm super uncomfortable. And I was like, can't do it. Shut it off.
It's tough. And that's the weird thing about having two services here, is that sometimes I'll say something in the first service and I'm like, ooh, I got to remember that because it worked well. Give up. You're never going to be able to recreate it. Nope. It happened spontaneously. It landed. It worked. Also, two very different crowds.
Yep.
At 8:30 and 11.
Yep.
And you would think 8:30 is earlier, maybe a little sleepier. It's more traditional. Maybe it's a little, more like you you have to be a little more serious. The opposite is true. It is so much easier to get 8:30 to laugh and engage. At 11, I don't know what it is. I don't know if people are just like ready for lunch or if it's just a different kind of human being. I don't know what it is.
There was a freshness in you're exploring the idea for the first time as well at 8:30, because most of the time I'm either in there or I'm watching online.
Yeah.
And there's always a freshness when you're exploring an idea, so you're exploring a little bit more, I feel like. And I think that 8:30 has a little bit more of this open-mindedness when it comes to that, because that's just who they are as an identity.
Yeah.
And 11 is expecting
different.
something else entirely.
It's different.
So interesting.
Well, and so sometimes just like flat out things don't work because it's a different audience. But also, the second time you give a message, I think is the hardest, because the first time you do it, I mean, sometimes that's tough too because it's the first time you're saying these ideas. But the second time, you're either trying to recreate what worked or you're trying to change what didn't, and you don't know, and that's really tough. But I've learned, and it's not that I've given a sermon 7 times, but there are, like, I'm not like worked at a church where I'm like doing, 4 or 5 back to back or whatever. But there are stories that I've used, like anecdotes and analogies and sermons that I've given that I've used many times throughout my life. Just they've come up a lot in sermons, kind of the core stories that you tell all the time. And I know how that's going to land because I've told the story enough times that I know no matter the context, I can kind of read the room and figure it out, and I can pick my spot. And so that's why you'll always see, like, when comedians record like specials, it's always at the end of the tour, because by then they know what works, they know how to time it, they know what jokes are going to land in what like cities they're in, and all of that.
I went and saw one of the most famous popular stand-up comedians today a couple of years ago live, and it was on a tour that was ultimately we knew was going to become a special. And this was about mid-tour. And I remember when the special came out, me and my buddy who went and saw it live, we watched the special together, and the order in which he did things. So like the last bit, he had done that when we saw him somewhere in the middle. And the thing that he used as when we saw him as his like boom, that's the exclamation point at the end of the thing, like thank you Dallas, or whatever. That was somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And it was just as funny seeing it again because he had perfected the delivery, how to land the plane. But I remember we ended up talking about it for like an hour, going like, that is so interesting how he changed the order and that made that much of a difference. And he was right to do so, because the thing that he ended with in the special was objectively the funniest thing. It had the most opportunity for us to just be like clenching our side, laughing uncontrollably because it was absurdly funny. But little things like that, just let me just switch these two things and let me shift this a little bit earlier or whatever. Just placement, and then really dialing in that delivery. It's such an art of nuance.
It's weird, and it's so fickle because you're the one doing it, and sometimes you're in a good headspace for it. Sometimes you're not. Like sometimes like you're tired, or somebody asked you a question or said something, concerning to you right before you go in there. And so now you're thinking about that, or like you're distracted by something. Like sometimes I'll be up there and they'll be like either like the lights are different, or there's a feedback, or like my microphone doesn't feel like it's sitting right, or some little thing, the air conditioner's a different temperature, like some little thing where I'm like, block it out. Like don't think about it, because you'll get distracted by it, and then it's really hard to kind of come back in. And so those are, I think, like anything, there's an element of luck to it. Because when I think of some of the best sermons I've ever given, it was one like, obviously, like you put thought into it, but there was just something in the moment that just the magic all came together. God showed up. You were in the zone, like you were locked in. You knew where you were going. You had a good feel for the room. Sometimes I feel like I don't have a good feel for the room, and you can lose them. Like it's hard to know. But there are some times where I'm like, I know it when you got them, and I've heard comedians, I've heard speechwriters use that same language where it's hard to capture that. It's hard to predict when it's going to happen, but when you've got a room.
Well, it's like who in their right mind could have ever predicted that the second highest scoring game in NBA history would be Bam Adebayo? 83 points.
Boo.
Insane. I know. I'm right there with you. We'll talk offline about my feelings because I agree 100%. Boo. It's not Bam's fault. It's the Washington Wizards for being such a garbage franchise.
I know.
Anyway, but so many things went right because he came in that first quarter, he scored 31, which has only ever been done like 4 or 5 times in the history of the league. Scoring 31 in a single quarter, that's insane. And he really did that. So he came out and just all the shots were hitting. Yeah. He was getting them fouled in the right places. And then the fourth quarter is what negates the first 3 quarters, which were legit. But things like that, like who could have predicted that? Bam couldn't even have predicted that. Just everything was going right because all NBA players, there's roughly like 400 active NBA players at any given moment, and they're all working arguably in relative, hardness, how much effort they're putting to be that level of good. But it takes just so many weird factors that come in to make something like that happen. And
it's hard to catch it. You never know when it's going to happen.
And I was initially just going to equate it like trying to get on a heater. Mm-hmm. Like everybody, we talk about athletes when they get on a heater, whether it's an NBA player, whether it's a pitcher for the MLB, whether it's a quarterback, doesn't matter. Like when somebody gets on a heater and they change the course of a game and we see something legendary, we look at it and we can dissect it because now we have 4K cameras that are capturing everything. And so we can go back and rewatch it a million times and go, man, this is crazy, and try to figure out how to capture that lightning in a bottle moment. And then, you can't. It's such an impossible thing to be able to predict. Yeah. All the exact same parameters can happen again for a player who's even better, like a Luka Doncic or something, and then it's just a normal game. Mm-hmm. And so to try and force something like on an Easter to say, how do I make this more meaningful? Well, pray and then do all the things that you normally do, but then just maybe give a little bit of extra time and a little bit of extra juice.
And it's tough. And like, speaking of like this weekend, so it's Palm Sunday. That's a big day, but it's sort of a big day adjacent. Like part of what makes it big is like we do an Easter egg hunt, which is not really about Palm Sunday. And then like you wave the palms when you come in. So there's like an involvement, component for the kids, which is great. But the message itself is just part of it is you can go in so many different directions. And sometimes I have tried to do too much where I'm trying to get people to come to the services. I'm trying to set up Easter. I'm trying to talk and get them to care about why Palm Sunday matters, even though like Palm Sunday only matters because of what happens later. Like it's not that day itself. Even what Jesus does doesn't have like super deep significance. You have to kind of understand so many other elements for it to matter. And then even when you get it, you're like, yeah, like he's demonstrating his humility. Like,
Fellowship of the Ring only matters because of what happened in Return of the King.
Super deep day on its own, and so this Sunday was just a weird day because it just sort of feels like it's the setup day, but it's a big day. I mean, it's probably our second highest attendance day of the year, and so it's a big day, but it's a weird day. So yeah, Sunday. It was a good day, though.
You feeling ultimately ready for just the dominoes of the Holy Week?
Yeah, we're doing so many different things. Thursday is very experiential, and Friday is so music driven. And I think people appreciate that, where you have a diversity of experience. It's not like 3 identical services in a row. So I think that's helpful. I think sometimes, though, you hit a fatigue wall where people just only have so many times that they want to come to church in a week in that space. And so,
we've tried as a church to figure out a way to sell this idea because we want people to experience it. But as you said, most people, even regular church attenders, they're like, come on, man, like 3 days in a 4-day span, that's a lot. Like, I get a day off, I get it. But, and just trying to make it feel like it's worth it to come to each thing without creating that fatigue, that burnout, church burnout. And then it's no wonder, like, some people, like even regular church attenders, I get it when they're like, you know what, Sunday after Easter, I'm staying home. I need a minute. And I get that. And then get back into the regular rhythm right afterward. But in trying to figure out, our job, trying to figure out a way to say, we're going to be true to why this day is important, to keep that valuable, but also make it so that you aren't feeling like just this sense of like obligation. Oh, I gotta go to church again. Like, it just that, no. This is an experience that's worth going to. Like, people keep going back to see Marvel movies, even when there are numerous terrible ones out there, because they think at the end of it, it's all going to be worth it.
Yeah.
When you get to Endgame or Infinity War, the next Spider-Man, whatever, they're like, oh, totally worth it to sit through Morbius. Ugh.
Yeah, I didn't watch that one. I will say
You don't have to. It's fine.
This and this is a much longer conversation we'd have to have on a different episode, but I am reminded as you were talking about this, about like, we're trying to do all we can, implying like we, the staff, we, the church leadership, are doing all we can to try to make the services intriguing and get people to want to come. And I had a really interesting conversation with some clergy friends a couple years ago about the topic was started because one person came in and she said, I am tired of trying to convince people to care about their own faith and their own salvation. And they said, like, this is your life, it's your faith, it's your salvation, and it's like I have to talk them into it like I'm a car salesman, but I don't get a commission if you give your life to Christ. Like, I don't like, and I think some people think we're in it because like we work in ministry because like we get some intrinsic, not even intrinsic, but like external reward
we don't
for
get
success
kickback for
or whatever.
this.
Yeah. Like, I'm not paid per baptism. And so like, I think that's another element where it's tough because we are called to make disciples. It's a part of our job. It's part of our call in ministry, especially when you work professionally in ministry. But I think there is also a struggle. People use the old phrase of, you can lead someone to water, but you can't force them to drink. And it's difficult to know what your role is in there because sometimes we say, well, it's your faith. And if you care about it, you'll make it a priority. But then we also get caught in the middle of like, but then we have the responsibility of making sure like the church is growing and we're able to pay our bills and do all these things. So we do have to ask people to kind of lean into those things. And then I love it because I'll have church members, usually when they get involved in leadership and they kind of see behind the curtain, they're like, well, why should we have to beg people to like pay for their own church? Don't they want to support their own church? And I'm like, yes, but also like, are they thinking about that? And how do they feel like what is theirs to do? It's a really tough situation. And I find, especially in weeks like this, where I have to make the announcement. So I get up on Sunday morning and I have to announce the services that we have in the week. And I'm trying to sell them. Like, I'm trying to get people to want to come to be a part of it. And there is a little in the back of my mind where I thought this Sunday, as I was, announcing all of it, is why am I so invested in you coming to these services? I want you to, but if we have, so on Good Friday, if we have 50 people show up, if we have 550 people show up, I don't know that will change much other than like we'll feel pretty good about it if a lot of people show up.
Yeah.
Now
we'll be dissecting it. How do we do that?
Well,
again?
yeah, exactly. But like if the church grows and we're able to change the impact we have on a community, that's different. That's not what I'm talking about. But on like a one-off kind of week like this, I just think about, as I've got all these colleagues and all these friends that work in churches and are all pastors, and everybody is just like, it's the Super Bowl. Like, you're pouring your whole heart and soul into this. You're killing yourself. You're working all these hours. You're like begging people to come to this service. You're really trying to get it. Why? And I don't mean that it's not important, but I do think that there's an interesting line between, it's your faith and I can't make you care about this, but it is my job to try to get you to care about it. And that's just a weird world to live in. It's a weird world to live in, and it's a weird space. Because I've heard like burned out clergy where like they're trying to like just make bills, and they're like, I can't convince people to care for their own church. And if they don't care about it, it's going to close. And I can't force them to act differently.
That's a dark place to be.
They get so jaded, and they're like,
we've met those clergy.
Oh, I know so many of them.
And
it's not them as
hard.
like a character judgment. They're in a bad circumstance. They're in a tough circumstance.
And most of the time, it's not their fault. They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't give a bad series of sermons that made everybody go, well, this church sucks. I'm leaving.
Well, and it's the same way but they get the blame. And I think about it. So I don't know if you saw the end of the UConn Duke game, which was amazing.
It was on. I was half watching it.
Oh my! The end of it was nuts. They were also down by 20 earlier in the game. It was amazing for me because there are few teams that I hate as much as Duke. Because I grew up in Arizona, and Duke
basketball
used to beat Arizona every year, and I hate them. And so the joy of watching them lose on a last second shot was just glorious. But in there, they were talking about the UConn coach, and they were saying that he won back-to-back titles a couple years ago and just knocked off like the tournament's #1, and he's only got like one loss to a ranked team. Like there's all these stats they were putting out, and they were like, we're watching this historic coaching run. And it's funny because when you hear coaches give post-game interviews when they lose or when things aren't going well, a lot of times good coaches will take accountability for that. They'll say, it's my fault. Like, I didn't prepare us enough. Like, I didn't have a good game plan. Like, the kids showed up and they gave their heart. They poured their heart into it. They did all that they could. And I just need to be better. We got to do a better job as an organization kind of moving forward. And they try to take that, like, I'm gonna stand in the door and I'm gonna take responsibility, and we're gonna try to put a positive face and kind of move forward. Sometimes it is funny because sometimes you'll have coaches stand up and they're like, they didn't make the shots. I don't know what to tell you. We had a great game plan. Our team was better than theirs. We were prepared. The shots didn't fall. And they're not trying to blame the players, but at some point you can only do so much. They're like, we've done all this work.
Yep.
And you made bad decisions. You didn't make the shots. And I've met clergy that are in that spot, or worship leaders or youth directors or whatever, where they're like, I'm doing all I can.
Oh, yeah.
People aren't showing up. They're not giving. They're not reading the Bible. They're not inviting anybody. Like, I can't do it all on my own. And it's tough because a lot of times the staff feel like they're held accountable for things that aren't really in their control.
Nope.
But also, then if you're held accountable, that also means that you should get some of the credit when things go well, which may not have had anything to do with you. And so and especially in ministry, you want to be like, no, it was God. But every staff person I know is like, but it was also me. Like,
I know the work I put in. I know how hard it was.
You're like, no, God did it all. And you can hear everybody in the background like, well, I mean, God didn't do it all, but I know what you're saying.
I know exactly, like, I've got multiple conversations in my mind of, pastors and worship leaders who've been in that exact same spot where everything's going great and the expectation is I have nothing to do with this. Mm-hmm. But you're like, I know how hard I worked to get here. I know how much work it took to get here.
It is complicated. It's complicated.
Yeah.
So I don't know. All to say, I'm feeling great about this week. I feel like we've got a good plan for a good mix of services. We had great attendance yesterday. Easter egg hunt was great, seeing all the little kids, kind of out there doing their thing. And I know even if it does rain on Sunday, like, we'll be okay as long as there's not an electrical fire again or some craziness. But yeah, I mean, barring some craziness like that, I just think there's a lot of energy and momentum in the church. And I think that sometimes it's hard to notice that until you get to a big day. Mm-hmm. And so we had high, I don't know the final count yet, but I know we had a higher attendance yesterday at Palm Sunday than we've had since pre-COVID.
A lot of people here yesterday.
Yeah. So there are some days like that where you can go, okay. And so while we've talked about today how I'm much more invested in the engagement and attendance in the weeks following Easter to know, because I think the point of Easter is to excite people, draw them in, invite them, that then moves into long-term, growth, fulfillment, engagement. People get inspired on the big day to then do something. And so I think Easter is the catalyst for what can come next in people's life and the church's life. And so I'm invested to see what that can look like, but I also think those big days can be a good metric of how have things been going in that space. It feels good. We had a lot of people turn out, the energy, the feedback we got. People bring their friends. That's a big deal. And I heard some of that yesterday. They were like, oh, I really wanted my friend to, see the church. We've been coming here for a couple of months and we just love it. Really wanted to see our friends.
I love that.
One of my parents to come and see this church we've fallen in love with. And I'm like, yes. Because that I think is the mark of both we're doing what we can and things are going well. We're being faithful to the vision. God is showing up. God's working and moving in that space. And I think that's my other kind of conflict. We really don't have time for this, but like whenever things go well, we always want to praise God. But when things don't go well, we don't want to blame God. And I think that's also complicated theologically. Where like when we have this
Sounds
huge
like a good
boom,
worship series that we can put together.
well, and everyone's like, God is moving here. But then when things are really going bad, no one's like, well, God abandoned us. Like God's not moving here.
I mean,
we
individuals
usually
might say that, but a collective church, you'll never hear that.
we usually blame ourselves when things go bad, and we give God the credit when things go well. And I think that's complicated. I think that's a complicated way to see humanity. I think it's a complicated way to see God. I'm not sure what the answer is, but
I don't think there is just one answer.
I know. Now I've tangented into a new place. Anyway.
We'll talk about it next week. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you on Easter Sunday.
Easter!
Peace.